Since 2013, Bombas has donated over 100 million socks, underwear, and T-shirts to those facing homelessness. If we counted those on air, this ad would last over 1,157 days. But if we counted the time it takes to make a donation possible, it would take just a few clicks. Because every time you make a purchase, Bombas donates an item to someone who needs it.
Go to bombas.com/soft and use code SOFT for 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/soft and use code SOFT.
Wendy's Coffee House.
3 different people said to me after they'd slept in the house the first night, just when I checked in the next morning, good hostess, do you have enough blankets? Do you have enough towels? And they said, oh my gosh, you won't believe the dream I had last night. There's this heartbroken young woman here on your property, and she's from colonial America.
It's Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio, and there's so much going on right now. I don't even know where to start with this. The NDE series with Leslie Kean is on, and then Robert Bigelow is having this big contest for people to come forward with proof of the afterlife, which is really cool. He's gotten some great response. One person I know is submitting an EVP study. There's so much going on with this. The other thing, though, too, is past life regression, which sometimes gives you a really hard and concrete clue that something has happened here that you may have had an involvement with, and it's affecting you in your personal life, which I think is proof of life after death. All right, but I'm biased. So with that, I wanted to get somebody else who also has that same inkling. So Wendy Rose Williams, who has talked about this before and is a past life regression therapist. So if you need help and you're interested and you want to find out, this is a go-to. But we're going to talk about her and her memory of being a ghost. I found this fascinating because it gives us that multidimensional aspect. Even though we think we're here fully and completely in the physical, there are other aspects of us that are doing homework somewhere else. So I'm going to let you explain this, Wendy, because I think, there's so many legs to go with this, and we're going to get into your near-death experience too. But first, say hi and introduce your book.
Well, fantastic, Wendy. Thanks for having me here. So the Flow One Plymouth Plantation, I wrote it as historical metaphysical fiction, but it's actually based on my own past life. And what happened was I was newly married in 1989, late 89, and we were looking for our first place to live. And we were very fortunate and purchased this lovely home on acreage and bought this big old colonial in the Boston area, Boxford, north of Boston. And my husband traveled extensively on business at that time. He was gone at least half the month. And what started happening almost immediately the first night he was gone was I had this dream that just became really terrifying. And what would happen was I would close up the house, go to bed for the night. Everything's good. I'm upstairs in the master suite, which is just off the stairs. And I would hear footsteps coming up the stairs. And that would wake me out of the dream because the dream would go past lucid. It would go to the point where I was fully awake. And I'm now petrified because I shouldn't be hearing anything. I'm the only one home. Everything's all locked up. And the first time it happened, I was just so petrified. There was no phone in the bedroom. It was 1990. Didn't have a cell phone yet. No house alarm. So I'm just petrified. And I literally get out of bed as quietly as I can. And because there's no lock on the door, I'm trying to put a chair under it. But the footsteps just stop. And then I'm in the position of, well, what do I do? Because I can't just go back to sleep. I don't know if this house is secure or if there's someone in the house. So I wait about 15 minutes with just bated breath. I'm hearing nothing. So I finally come out of the bedroom and check the whole house. I check outside. There was new snow, so I could see there were no footsteps leading up to the house. So I go back to bed, clutching my bed covers up over me like a 2-year-old because it was so frightening. And in the morning, first thing I do, I go to work. First thing I do is call a locksmith. And when I need you to put a really good lock on my bedroom door. And the guy's like, sure, what time do you want me to meet you after work?
Okay.
So we arranged that. So literally the next night I go to sleep, I lock the bedroom door. So that gives me some peace of mind. But the same thing, same dream, same experience. And I know I'm awake. I'm absolutely awake.
Mm-hmm.
But what my sense was, because the dream went further that night, and what happened was I could see like the walls of the house fall away, and I could just see this big, big rock. And this heartbroken young woman, that was just emanating from her. And I could see she looked like she was colonial American times because she had a little white kerchief on her head and a little white apron over her long skirt, and she had a matching long sleeve blouse on with it. And she just is trying to climb up this rock, and she's just looking toward the water. She's looking east, and I can just feel her yearning for her beloved to come, but he's not coming. So this dream then goes on night after night, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got a ghost on this property. And I did have an amusing moment. I'm like, the realtor should have mentioned that.
Yeah.
Like the realtor's going to tell you that as part of your purchase and sale agreement.
Oh, sometimes they do. Sometimes they're supposed to. Yeah. It's at this point, there's not a consensus on that.
But I just didn't know what to do. And this just went on. And I was having this dream and experience, because it definitely became an experience where I'm wide awake.
Yeah.
At least 2 to 3 times a week. So I try to share it with my husband when he comes home, and he's kind of giving me the look like, Wendy, there's no such thing as ghosts. And it's like, I know, I'm struggling with that concept too. And same thing, I tried to share it with my mom, and she's, just went to this analytical place. Well, you must be kind of nervous sleeping there, alone in this big property by yourself.
Yeah.
So I didn't have anyone else to talk with about it. So I just went through it for 3.5 years in the time we lived in the house.
Whoa.
And I just couldn't, I wanted to help her. So it got to the point where I was, dialoguing with her, and I felt like I knew her better and better, but I didn't know why she wouldn't leave, why she wouldn't go to the light, why she wouldn't leave the property. And I just didn't have the skill set. And I was also at the point, arguing with myself, well, maybe this isn't real, what's going on. And I'm so glad we had 3 different guests stay with us in the 3 or 4 years that we lived there. And I said nothing to them about this experience. And 3 different people said to me after they'd slept in the house the first night, just when I checked in the next morning, good hostess, do you have enough blankets? Do you have enough towels?
Yeah.
And they said, oh my gosh, you won't believe the dream I had last night. There's this heartbroken young woman here on your property, and she's from colonial America. And my jaw was like on the floor.
Wow.
Because how could they have the same dream?
All 3?
And all 3 of them, different points in time, did not know each other. And each one told me after their first night in our home about having this vivid dream. So it was quite an interesting process. We then...
Well, quick, did they attach it to a ghost or just a dream?
Varied responses of they didn't know what it was either. They said they had a dream, but it felt like there was a ghost.
Okay, so some of them might have at least softened you up the fact that, yes, there's something else here, and it could be a ghost because you had some validation.
Yes, exactly. It was that amazing validation that I really appreciated, and that got me out of the place of doubting myself that there really was something going on. I wasn't just having some weird anxiety about being in the home alone.
Wendy Rose Williams is going to tell us about how this book came about, because this is a book on reincarnation and being your own ghost. Okay, so that's the fascinating thing about this. So it might be, if you're having issues right now, you might want to clear them so you don't want to come back and be your own ghost. Technically. Hearing somebody else's story like this can often lead to questions and inquiring and a little bit more investigation. So it's nice to plan in advance if you can. Wendy's Coffee House.
Fortunately, by 2013, I had two good friends who were psychic, and I went to both of them and said, I think I'm my own ghost. Is that a thing?
Past life regression therapist Wendy Rose Williams, my guest. You now have corroboration from 3 different people who stayed at the house that they had this dream about this young woman. So where do you go from here?
Yes. So what happened next was we relocated from the Boston area out to Seattle. And I'll be honest, I didn't know what to make of the experience. I didn't know how to help this young woman. I just didn't know what to do with it. So honestly, I just tried to forget about it because I didn't know how to help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what happened, literally 20 years later, we moved in 1993. And in 2013, one of my best friends calls me to say that she'd had a very unusual experience that involved me and that she needed me to know about it. So she told me over the phone that she had gone to the bookstore. She wanted to buy the latest Brian Weiss title. And she said what happened instead was this book called Sacred Spaces just glued itself to her hands. Mm-hmm. And she felt compelled to buy it. She took it home, tried to lay it down, and same thing. She's like, I've got to read something in here. And she looked through the index or the table of contents and read the chapter on how to clear your home of a ghost. And she thought that was really weird because she's like, I don't have any ghosts in my home. I'm a Reiki master. I clear my home regularly. There's no issue. Mm-hmm. But what happened was a few nights later, her dog wakes her up barking in the middle of the night. And she thinks, oh gosh, got to get him quiet, got to let him go out. And it was unusual. So she goes to let him out into the backyard. But instead, he just goes berserk in the family room and is like barking up at something on the ceiling. So she looks up on the ceiling and she sees a ghost just circling around and around on the ceiling. And she said the heartbreak emanating from that ghost. She said that she almost got sucked into it too, but she realized, oh, that's why I read Sacred Spaces. I've got to clear this ghost from my home. Mm-hmm. So she went through that process and did that, but said it was a heck of it was really hard to do.
Yeah.
And she wasn't confident the ghost went to the light. And yeah. She then slept on it thinking, okay, that was really unusual. And then overnight she realized that ghost was me. So she contacted me and let me know what had happened. And what we realized was we had been in colonial America at Plymouth Plantation together. And she had been my best friend who lived in the house next door. So what perfect sense that all made is just amazing and incredible as it sounded. And she's a medical technologist. She's a laboratorian. I'm an MBA. It's not like we're these fanciful people. So it was really straining our belief systems.
Yeah, it's like you're going in with no preparation.
Right. Got thrown into the deep end of the pool. But we both were just validating each other. And she just said to me, very kindly at the end of that phone call, you need to clean up your mess. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, I sure do. But I don't know how.
Yeah.
I've just never heard of being your own ghost. I didn't know you could be here twice. Yes. It's not like I could Google how do you send your own ghost to the light.
How do you exercise yourself, basically?
Right. I didn't know the concept of soul retrieval. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know, I had some sense that I hadn't learned a lesson or I hadn't done something right. And therefore I got stuck and was like repeating it. Because, the ghost was just so repetitive. All she would do is like climb up on this rock and then look toward the river and her beloved wouldn't come. It was like stuck.
Yeah.
Just stuck in this loop.
Yeah.
So I went to two Fortunately, by 2013, I had two good friends who were psychic, and I went to both of them and said, I think I'm my own ghost. Is that a thing?
No, this isn't odd. This is a one-off. This is one of those, okay, let's do some real homework here, because this isn't, you don't hear about this. Yeah, yeah.
And they both kind of cocked their heads, this is a separate conversation, but they both kind of cocked their heads and said, well, I know how to clear a ghost, but I don't know how to clear a ghost that's a person that's here now asking you the question. That means you have to do your own work.
Yeah.
And again, I'm okay, great. Any inkling of what my own work is? And both of them said, very kindly, this is above my pay grade.
Yeah, I knew that was coming. Yes. Okay. Yeah. All right. So go ahead.
One of them did refer me to a spiritual teacher, but it took a while to, get the appointment with her to plan for the session. And I was just, going back and forth like, this is just the craziest thing I've ever heard of. But luckily, in the meantime, I think it was maybe 3 weeks before I had the appointment, I just buckled down. I didn't yet know how to meditate, but certainly I knew how to pray and to just try and figure this out for myself. I tried to do some journaling about it. And what I was catching on to was that it was about forgiveness, that I had not forgiven someone and I'd not forgiven myself.
Yeah.
And that was the hook, and that was the loop. So by the time I had the session with the teacher, she said, congratulations, you did get your own ghost home to the light. Now I'll help you do the soul retrieval and just understand and make sure you fully forgive yourself and the other person, and make sure that it's that 1600s life is the right place in your timeline of all your life. So it was literally like 2 minutes at the beginning of the session, and then we moved on to many other things.
Wow.
But that's the crazy story of trust your instinct, even when it seems wacky and out there and other people might not believe you. You've got to listen to that intuition, that inner knowing, and just ask the questions. Well, okay, if that's true, what next? What should I do? What does this mean for me? And just start following the breadcrumbs.
Well, it's like there was a tear, and then part of that part of you was still battling with the loss and the grief and the longing. And so the amazing thing is that other people also could tune into that. We have so many psychic abilities that we don't yet comprehend or really validate, because we haven't gone there. And so, Native Americans have the soul retrieval. Well, other indigenous cultures are familiar with soul retrieval, and they have ceremonies to do this to help, if you're split apart, to come back and heal. This is new for the Western culture. And so it's wonderful to have a storyline. You're a template for other people who may have experienced this and had nowhere to go with it. So I want to get back into one more thing, though, before we go forward with this, because this gets us back into the book and the next part with all the characters. You had a near-death experience. And so as you're dealing with all of this, can we go into the next break and talk about how that factored in? Because that isn't included in the book, but it's right here in the middle of that timeline when you have a huge departure where you go, on a different plane and check in, I think, with yourself and your oversoul. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So what happened was in 1997, I was newly pregnant. I was 10 weeks pregnant, absolutely thrilled because there'd been years of infertility, and I'd also had 2 ectopic pregnancies, and we did have an 18-month-old toddler. So we were just over the moon. But I began having some precognitive dreams, but I didn't know what precognitive dreams were, that they could be showing you something that could be coming up in the future. And it was a warning. So what the dreams were was I would just see these horrible storms at sea, and I would see this big multi-masted ship, and it would always just tear apart. There was all this ripping and tearing going on. Masts would pull off, winches and cleats would all pull off, and the ship would go down. So I didn't know what to do with it. Kept having this dream night after night. And the only physical symptom I had going on was having a lot of heartburn. which I thought was quite odd so early in the pregnancy because I'm only 10 weeks. But, I'd called the OB several times. I'd had one visit. They're like, everything looks good. Take Mylanta. Mylanta is safe. Every pregnancy can be different.
Mm-hmm.
I was working at home, and my husband's at work with one car. Our nanny's off at the park with our daughter with the other car. And I just could not get comfortable. It was just this burning in my gut. And I just honestly felt like impending doom.
Wendy's Coffee House, Wendy Rose Williams.
I just honestly felt like impending doom. And I have never felt like that in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to work, and then I go lay down, and I go in the bathroom again. I'm like, I'm going to be sick. I don't know what's going on. And all of a sudden, I'm in the bathroom, and there is this searing pain in my abdomen, and I felt something rip and tear, just like that ship going down, that ripping and tearing.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked down because I thought, someone stuck a knife in me. I just don't know how else to describe this.
Yeah.
And I passed out on the floor. And I was curled up in a fetal position. And I only came to because I could hear this insistent male voice just kept saying, Wendy, you've got to get up right now. Right now. We need you to wake up.
Oh.
I came to, the voice just wouldn't leave me alone.
Yeah.
I look around in the master bathroom. It is just filled with light, with these tremendously large light beings that I can only describe as angels. The male angel addressed me again, and he said, you need to call for help right now or you're going to go home. And I knew exactly what he meant, that I was going to die.
Yeah.
And I said, I okay, but I can't walk. And he said, you only have to be willing to try to get on your hands and knees. And if you do that, we can help you. So I did. And the minute I got on my hands and knees, it was like being lifted. And I felt like they flew me to my phone, which was not far away. There was a landline on my nightstand. I then call my husband at work. I don't even think to call 911. Angel said call phone. Yeah. My husband works 5 minutes from home. So I called him. The miracles continue because it's the first and only time I've ever reached him at work. I give him great credit because all I said was, something's wrong. I need you to come home right now and drive me to the hospital. Oh. And he said, on my way. I mean, and bless him for that. I then called the OB office and they said, when you get here, don't park the car. We'll bring a wheelchair down. We don't want you walking and we'll be waiting for you. And luckily, the OBGYN office was based at the hospital. So I don't think I'd be telling this story otherwise. So we get to the hospital within 15 minutes, and they take me into the ultrasound room at the OBGYN office. They try and do an ultrasound, but you can't see anything on the screen. And I'm like looking at it like, is your machine on? Is that working? Because I've had ultrasounds before, and I knew you could see it working. And ultrasonographer said, I'll be right back. Uh-huh. And she ran and got not only a physician, but a nurse midwife, and they came really quickly into the room. And the OB took one look at the screen, and he just kind of touched me on the shoulder and said, we need to admit you to the floors now because there's a major bleed going on. I think I felt an organ burst is the only way I can describe what happened at home. And he said, that makes perfect sense. We need to get you on the floors because you're losing too much blood. My abdomen was just distending and rising, which was just really crazy to look at because, 10 weeks, I don't look pregnant yet, but I'm now getting this just big distension. So I'm straight onto the floors. They asked my blood type, which I knew, and then I can hear the nurse. They also gave me the room right next to the nurse's station, and I can hear her talking with the central blood bank. And because each hospital doesn't necessarily have its own blood out here, it depends. Some have blood banks and some use the central blood bank. So she's calling and asking for blood, and she's learning that there'd been a major train collision 2 or 3 days before, which I didn't know about, and they didn't have any A-negative blood. This is now a big issue too because they need to hang blood and can't immediately get it.
Yeah.
so I'm told, okay, you need to lie flat in the bed, can't get up even to go to the bathroom. We just need to get this bleeding to stop. And they wanted to do surgery that day, but it wasn't making sense because we didn't know if it was going to stop. We didn't have blood supplies, and it just wasn't. And they didn't know what they were operating on, and that really bugged me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm pregnant, I don't want surgery if we don't have to do surgery, if we can, get this to resolve with some blood transfusion. So we did get blood. We did try transfusions. I was in the hospital for 2 or 3 days, but the doctor was taking my hematocrit each day and just was showing me and sharing the results with me, obviously. And he said, we've got to do surgery, Wendy. You're bleeding out. I said, I know, because they just could not get enough blood on board. So I agreed to surgery very reluctantly. It was scheduled for first thing the next morning. I was trying to relax after dinner the night before the surgery because I was so exhausted, just so wiped out. I just really didn't feel like I had enough of me left, like enough life force or energy left.
Yeah.
And trying to relax and visualize a positive outcome. And the minute I pictured a positive outcome and a successful surgery, I popped right out of my body. And I'm up floating above my body, and I'm looking back going, oh, wow, look at her. She is a mess. And notice I'm referring to myself in the third person. And I'm thinking, wow, she's whiter than the sheets. There's really an issue here. And oh, my God, couldn't they have at least brushed her hair? She looks like a wild because I've been in, bed for 4 days. It's not like there's exactly been a mirror around. But it was really funny because I felt so great to be out of my body and to know I was okay and to have no pain and no more worries. I felt great. So I just kept on floating up. I went up to the ceiling of the hospital room. And I do remember thinking, my God, I'm so tired. I hope they don't make me walk through a long tunnel. So I guess I knew just as much about.
Let's not do the tunnel thing. Yeah.
No, people usually went through a tunnel, and it sounded too strenuous. And the moment I had that thought, this beautiful, pristine escalator with no one on it and clean as can be and just shining with light appears. And I'm like, oh, good, I can get on the escalator. So I'm leaning on the escalator, and I look down at myself, and I'm like this white, bouncy beach ball, but I'm kind of deflated, and I know my body's back in the bed. I go up and up and up the escalator, and the minute I get to the top of the escalator, there's like 20 beings of light there. It's like the best welcome home party ever. And the angels that had been in my bathroom were there. All 4 of my grandparents were there. And my mom's parents had passed on, and I immediately recognized them. Even though they look like me, everyone's like this white, amazing, sparky ball of light. It's like this little lightning storm. It's just so lively.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad's parents were there too, which I thought was super cool that I recognized them because I never met them because they died before I was born. And the same male angel that addressed me in the bathroom addressed me again. And he said, welcome home. We're so glad you're here. You've done nothing wrong. We're so happy to have you here. But you need to be very clear that if you take one more step at home, you will not be able to go back. So that certainly caught my ear. And they gave me this huge hug when I first got there, and just feeling that unconditional love of home, because we don't get unconditional love very often. So it was just a really, really big deal. And he said he could also tell me that if I chose to go back, I would not only survive the surgery, but I would have a full recovery. And he also wanted me to know that my baby would be born healthy.
Okay, we're going to take a break.
Of course.
Wendy Rose Williams, my guest, Regression Healing, Wendy's Coffee House. Wendy Rose Williams, the near-death experience goes on. You said, no, I'm not going to do the tunnel, so they provided an escalator. That was very, very nice of them.
So accommodating.
Yes, so you got the escalator, and then you're also told that it's going to be okay. Did you even have a thought of not staying?
Oh, I absolutely wanted to stay at home because I was like trying to like peek over their shoulders. I'm trying to jump and like look over them because they're kind of like blocking my view and reminding me I can't take one more step at home or I can't go back. So the third thing that the angel added after that I would survive the surgery and recover fully and the baby would be born healthy, the next thing he said was, but you need to understand that life will be very difficult, probably for many years, because you are not on your life's path. You're not living your purpose. So, of course, I asked him, oh my gosh, that I want to live my life's purpose. I want to do the right thing. Can you please tell me what am I meant to be doing? And he just gently shook his head and wouldn't comment. So I kind of looked around at the others thinking maybe one of them will give.
Yeah, okay. Who can I get this out of?
Just, putting duct tape over their mouths, throwing away the key. Okay, I'm not supposed to know. So the minute he'd asked the question, do you want to go back? I pictured my toddler. And I pictured that I was going to have this new baby and said, oh, absolutely. I want to go back for my children. So everyone came in and gave me a second group hug. And that time I understood it. It wasn't just love. They were giving me this huge amount of energy because I was below empty on the gas tank. And I don't think I would have survived that surgery.
Yeah.
Except I got this huge amount of energy. And they then just, everyone said, okay, go for it. You can do it. And just pushed me, kind of gently back down, twirled me back down the escalator. And I'm like waving over my shoulder. And they just recede in the distance. And I just gently go back in my body. And did have a successful surgery, obviously, the next day. They had never done the surgery before. They estimated I lost 3/4 of my blood supply during the whole process because what had actually happened was the uterus had ruptured, specifically the fundus, Fundus, at the top of it, which is an aorta. So that's why just so much blood was pumping out in the abdomen and why I could see it distending. And that's what the dream was trying to tell me was, girl, your ship is going down.
Yeah.
That ripping and tearing, my subconscious was trying to warn me. So I go home to recover. I'm in the hospital a few days and then go home for 6 weeks recovery because I was still quite low on blood and essentially bed rest at home for 6 weeks. I'll go back to work. It's a job I love. I've been there 3 years. And I'm there for about 6 weeks maybe. And all of a sudden, zero warning, Friday afternoon, I get called into my boss's office. And I don't think a thing about it. But HR is sitting there. And I'm like, why is there a human resources professional here? And why do they both look like they wish they weren't here? And why do they have a folder? So I get laid off. Not only my income and a job I love and I'm really good at, but I carry the family health insurance. And I'm pregnant. So this is just not an easy scenario. So, it is what it is. And I go on home and, share the news with my husband and with our nanny. 1 week later to the day, my husband comes home from work hours late. And just the way he walked in the door, it's like, oh my goodness, I've never seen him look so dejected. And he said, I need to tell you something really hard. And so I was like, oh my goodness, what's up? He shared with me that they had just gone to payless paydays in his software company that he was one of 5 owners in. And I'm looking at him going, what's a payless payday? I don't even know what that means. And he said that they had done a layoff of almost the entire company. There were about 100 people. And that he was going to need to continue working and would be working very long hours because he was going to have to fulfill the contracts that had been sold so that they could, keep their reputation and try and sell the company. So that's what payday is. Oh, goody. You're going to work 80 to 100 hours a week and there'll be no paycheck involved.
No compensation.
Great. I didn't like this term.
Oh, I'm assuming this is a kickstart for finding out what the heck your life purpose is.
Yes. That did not come up for another 5 or 6 years. It took us going through a divorce. Fast forward, we are divorced. We've got a 6 and an 8-year-old. We go through all that transition. We both land on our feet. We are co-parenting successfully. Fast forward again to 2010. And my daughters are 12 and 14, and I've really rebuilt my life in a good way, and they're doing great. So I decide, okay, I'm ready to meet a nice guy. How in the world do you do that? And my girlfriends tell me, well, you go on Match.com. I'm like, what's that? So they explain, well, it's a dating website. I go on there, and very quickly, within a couple months, I meet the man that's not only a soulmate, but he tells me about Journey of Souls. He tells me about past life regression and life between lives because he's getting ready to go for his own second spiritual regression, life between lives session. Mm-hmm. And he's got what I would call a soul contract, an agreement we made before we incarnated to wake me up spiritually. So that's where it finally comes full circle in 2010, 10 years ago.
So that's the backstory for the book.
That's the backstory, yes.
You have a storyline that is absolutely incredible. This didn't happen overnight, though.
No, the book took me 5 years to write just because, and I didn't research it. It just was, it would come through to me bit by bit in my own past life regression session or in a dream or in a meditation. And I did go to Plymouth Plantation in Massachusetts because there's a living history museum, and just to, feel into that energy. But I'd already written the book by then. But I just wanted to go visit it before I published and make sure that, everything just felt as shipshape as I could make it.
When you had your past life regression, you're talking as this character. You're using language that is not familiar to you in your normal day-to-day. That, to me, is that authenticity that says, this is legit.
For me too, Wendy, because the way it worked was basically I'd be sitting at the computer and I would have meditated, I would have cleared my energy, and it was like having the story dictated to me from the point of view of Anne Warren Little. I didn't know some of the terms she used, and 1600s is a long time ago.
Yeah.
So it just was, really, really interesting to hear her explain from her viewpoint what had happened and why she chose to remain as a ghost. Yeah. For those 100 years.
This is a historical novel that has a lot of details about what life was like at that time, furnished to you by going and doing these past life visits. What's the takeaway?
Trust your own intuition. Be willing to listen to that inner voice, even if it just seems so out there and so different. Just be willing. Put your hand over your heart and just listen to that wisdom and follow it.
If you're interested in having a past life regression, WendyRoseWilliams.com, regression healing, and there might be a way for you to get outside the box that you're in to have an overview. And maybe you will meet your own ghost. What do you think the odds are on that, Wendy?
I think it happens more often than we know because things are really changing and shifting. And I think there is a lot of that energy, and we can learn to do our own soul retrievals. So happy to have people request a complimentary 15-minute phone appointment via my website. And also the first 2 people that mentioned they heard this interview on Wendy's Coffee House, be happy to send them an audiobook version for free. Listen to the book for yourself.
Yay. Thank you. All right. And this, again, it gives you a new perspective on how all of these dots connect with the people who are in your current life. And I think that's magical. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. I love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Wendy's Coffee House, you can check out the blog, wendyscoffeehouse.com, or you can check out the archives for the other shows on Audio Boom.